going to just call on the people in the order that I see them on my screen. And could you just briefly introduce yourselves? We're so happy to have you all. So Kat Spleet, you're first. She might have a delay in her audio.
How about now? There it goes. I was talking to Dr. Adamson earlier. My mic takes 10 seconds to start after I've clicked it off. Anyways, my name's Kat Spleet. I'm an English major, film and media studies minor, pursuing my undergrad, and I'm just as of this semester adding an environmental humanities certificate to my degree, and I'm lucky enough to be interning with Dr. Adamson as well, which I'm really looking forward to.
Thank you. Sarah.
I'm entering a fourth-year PhD student in the School of Sustainability, and my research looks at integrating, weaving together kind of indigenous knowledges and nature-inspired design called biomimicry in understanding what a regenerative system looks like, a regenerative food system looks like in arid regions. And I also, I come from Cairo, Egypt, and yeah, that's it. Part of Slow Food.
Thank you, Sarah. Constance.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm Constance Gordon. I'm an assistant professor at San Francisco State University in communication studies, but I, as probably many of you, are very interdisciplinary. I found this group online, and so I'm happy to be in conversation with you all. I figured if I'm spending my time at my house reading the same things as you are, I might as well have folks to talk about it with. So it's nice to see you all.
I'm so excited that someone found us. Yanan.
Hi, my name is Yanan Lu. I'm from China. I'm one of the students of Professor Adamson. My research interest is in food justice and farm workers' welfare and how we can move towards a more sustainable food future. Yeah, need help from people around the world. So yeah, that's my interest.
Melissa Nelson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Nelson, and I am a new professor in the School of Sustainability. Just joined a couple weeks ago, and I'm very, very happy to be a part of this new community. Just retired from 18 years in as a professor of American Indian Studies at San Francisco State University. So Constance, we'll have to connect there, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Holly Eakin.
Hi, I'm a professor in the School of Sustainability. My research focuses on adaptation and vulnerability in face of multiple shocks and stressors, and I've done that in the past, focusing on rural livelihoods, particularly in Latin America, and looking at farm system vulnerability and kind of agroecological perspectives and such. So I'm happy to be part of that. Oh, I teach food systems as well in the School of Sustainability.
Thank you. Sarah Lemon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Lemon. I'm a staff member at the Sweetie Center for Sustainable Food Systems in the School of Sustainability. And I just started as a first-year PhD student in the School of Sustainability, and I'm really interested and focused on small-scale livestock slaughter, and particularly indigenous worldviews around slaughter.
James Bennett.
Hi, everyone. I'm a MFA student in the creative writing program. So this is a kind of a personal interest, but working on projects, writing about intersection of food, microbiology, and autoimmunity. Those all intersect. So hoping to learn a lot.
Welcome. Mauricio Mejia.
Hello, everyone. I am an associate professor in the design school. My research is about designing for change, changing behaviors, organizations, systems, and also with interest in sustainability and health.
Natalie Morris.
Hi, Natalie Morris. I am a first-year PhD student in the School of International Letters and Culture, specifically the Italian program, with Julianne Vitullo. And my studies kind of lie within food culture and media studies within Italian and American cultures. And I also work at ASU at the College of Nursing and Health Innovation as well.
And Julianne Vitullo.
I'm a professor in Italian Studies in the School of International Letters and Cultures. And I'm doing research on the local indigenous traditions of Southern Italy that Ansel Keys claims to have discovered, and how they're branded as a universal model, and with all the unfortunate consequences of that, including the erasure of other important indigenous traditions.
Irina.
Hello, very nice meeting you all. I'm Arina Milkozernova. I speak with Russian accent. And I'm a third-year graduate student with Julianne Vitullo and Johnny Adamson at Silk. I was fortunate to work with the Coushatta tribe of Louisiana and Denise Bates as a professor. So hopefully my focus will come from different perspectives to one, sort of more focus on the different knowledge systems, and anyway, food sovereignty is an important part of it. Thank you. I work for school sustainability as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Crystal Franco.
Hi, I'm Crystal Franco. I live in Ajo, Arizona, and work for the Ajo Center for Sustainable Agriculture. It's a border town about 10 miles from the Tohono O'odham Reservation, and I work in the COVID-19 food relief program, and I'm a master's student at ASU in American Indian Studies and in nonprofit management.
Thank you. And Rebecca Sosi. We're so lucky to have you.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to see so many amazing ASU colleagues. I totally miss you guys, and I love you guys, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this. So my name is Rebecca Sosi. For those who don't know me, I'm a Regents professor. Currently, I'm at the University of Arizona. I went there 4 years ago to do a vice provost appointment. But I always loved ASU. I was at ASU for 22 years, and Joan McGregor and I worked on research way back when with the Convention on Biodiversity, and it went into this whole area of sustainability. Before there was a school of sustainability, we were doing these things on global systems and food and water. And my work is specifically located on Indigenous peoples and sort of the legal rights under domestic and international law. And I have to say that the one upside, well, I'm sure there's more than one, but one of the upsides of the strange time that we're in is that we actually can join together across the physical spaces. And I feel like there is such a richness about that. And sorry, you were talking about arid climates, and I've been dialoguing with people about water and food and indigeneity in all of these different places and learning and being enriched by that. And Joni, thank you so much. You sort of blazed the trail, right? Because you went the other direction. And so we're all connected to those indigenous communities on this land and this place that our universities serve. So I just have the greatest respect for all of you. And Melissa, it's great to see you and to welcome you here. Yay.
I'm so lucky to have both of you here with us. And Sally Kitch.
Hello. I'm also, excuse me, I've been on 14 Zooms or something today, so my voice is getting rough. I'm also delighted to be here and delighted to see colleagues and students I've worked with before, and this is a great moment for us to be coming together around this issue. I am a Regents and University Professor of Women and Gender Studies in the School of Social Transformation, also founding director of the Institute for Humanities Research and the Humanities Lab, which is now being directed by Julianne Vitullo, who didn't want to take more time than necessary to introduce herself while I'm on a sort of sabbatical leave from my administrative work. I've been working with several of you over the years, Joni and Joan in particular, and Rebecca, and on various aspects of the environmental humanities. I got into this field because at ASU I knew that's where I had to be. And right now I'm working with this subgroup on food justice issues, and I'm working on gender issues. And I'm not limiting that to women. I think gender is a cultural construct that shapes everything we do and everything the way we organize everything. And I'm trying to develop that into a research area that hasn't been explored that much beyond women's participation. So I'm very interested and delighted to be part of this and enjoying the readings and the camaraderie.
Avrajit Day.
Hello everyone, I'm Avrajit. I'm from India. I'm a graduate student in the Department of English and my area of research is TESOL. But I'm very interested in eco-criticism. I'm just thankful to Professor Adamson for letting me audit her class. And I'm very excited about this group and I'm really honored to be here. Thank you.
Nina Berman.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nina Berman. I'm in the School of International Letters and Cultures. I'm sorry why I'm stumbling over this name right now. I think I want to rename the school. Anyways, I'm new to this field of study. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very interested in food studies. And I recently started a project on eco-literacy in Kenya.
And Selena Asuna.
Hi, everyone. I will come out of the dark. I'm Selena Osuna. I am the coordinator for the Institute of Humanities Research and also the assistant director of Desert Humanities. Some of you I recognize from, from various projects throughout the last 5 years, in which you would have known me as PhD student working on all things desert. So desert lit, art, culture. Nice to be here, thank you.
And Elizabeth Grumbach.
Hey y'all, I'll also come out of the dark. Hi, I'm the assistant director at the Institute for Humanities Research. I'm so happy to join y'all today, even though I have to leave in just a little while. I mostly focus on digital humanities in my scholarship, and then otherwise just supporting IHR initiatives like this one. But I do have some colleagues across mostly the US and Canada that work on eco-critical digital humanities. So thinking about the materiality of what the digital and what digital technologies do to our environment. So I'm happy to kind of sit in these conversations to learn more about what y'all are doing and what they're doing. So thanks.
Well, we're really excited that today we're going to be talking about methods and theories in food sovereignty, food justice, and food studies issues. And then we'll have 2 more reading groups, and the next one will focus on food sovereignty, and the third one will focus on the impact of COVID-19. So we're really excited to have, let's see, Crystal. Sounds like you're working on the front lines on that issue. We're going to be taking a look at what has recently been called by the Lancet global syndemic, the notion that racism is a pandemic and institutional racism is an epidemic, and that it's not an accident that these things come together to impact communities that have been having environmental justice issues for decades at higher rates than others. So we're really excited to get the discussion started, and several of you have already sent in questions, but Joan, do you think we should break into small groups for just a minute
Yeah, why don't we do that, and we could try to enumerate a few more questions. Some of you send in some, but just so we can kind of make sure we can shape the discussion a little bit. So how about we break into does 2 groups seem like, does that seem too big?
I think that'd be good. We were thinking we would break into 2 groups, and amongst yourselves in a group, you would come up with one solid question for each of the articles. And then we have the great questions that several of you have already sent in. So what we'll do is we'll get back together and we'll talk about the questions that you come up with for the intersectionality article, and then another question for the environment and food justice article. And then we'll come back together and we'll combine them with the great questions that some of you have already sent in. How does that sound?
Where should we start? Do you want to start, Joni? And do you want to? We talked about a lot of things, and we have lots of questions.
Well, we sort of broke it up into some discussion of the article on intersectionality, and then we talked about the article on environmental justice. And
yes.
Is that how you guys did it?
That's what we did.
Okay.
We did it the other way around, though, but yes, we went one question at a time.
Actually, why don't we start with the Mares and Peña essay?
Okay.
We ended there and it's fresh in our mind, so we'll start there. So I'm just going to give it back to my group and to anyone that would like to start with, some of the more interesting things that we talked about. Or, just acquainting the larger group with some of the things that we discussed about, whether it's a question or just an issue, a topic. So focusing on Devin Peña and Christine Mares. And I might just say canals.
This is like our
about canals. Let's see. I might, if you don't mind, I might just call on Natalie to start us out, if you don't mind.
Well, I'll introduce what it was that we were talking about and how we got to canals. Julianne brought up how she was interested in the idea of autotopography within the chapter that we had read. And so we kind of went from there to talking about the idea of looking at land, not just from the 4 northeast, southwest directions and orienting yourself in that way, but how, for example, Native American cultures might look at it from, how do I say this? From a top and a bottom perspective, if you will. You had a better word for that, Joni, but
I said that the Navajo, for example, and the O'odham look at the world from 6 directions, not 4. So it's not a flat earth in a way. It includes the cosmos, it includes the soil, it includes the earth. So it's we talked about it in terms of what might be called a vernacular landscape or a storied landscape, as opposed to the quote unquote colonial imperial official landscape. So there's an official landscape. It's 101, 202, and 303 highways. That's the official landscape, as opposed to the stories associated with South Mountain and the stories associated with Red Mesa, and the stories associated with Baboquivari Peak, which is sacred to the O'odham people. So it's just a different orientation towards the landscape.
And so that kind of reminded me about growing up. I grew up here in Phoenix and different parts of Phoenix. Now I live in downtown Phoenix, but I grew up on the west side and often went to the east side. And so I've, had this perspective. It reminded me of our canal system, and whether you look at it with our quote unquote modern canals or of our ancient canal system, which kind of sparked another thing. A couple years ago, I did a project in another semester that I had regarding studying our waterways and our, where we've been and where we are now with that. And so it sparked how our canal system isn't just this thing running through our city, or if you will, there's canal systems all over the world. But that sparked a memory with me that canals are a way to look around and orient yourself as well. And so we had a pretty, I would say, robust discussion about that. And if I can point someone out, I will pass it to maybe Hallie or Joni again to kind of expand on how we talked a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, if Holly could talk about what you said about, what's our goal? Is it efficiency or is it something else? I don't know if you want to jump in.
Well, I think we were just I was just thinking about, as we think about place and what it means, it also talks about the kind of disjunctures that we have when we invest in particular types of in this case, a massive landscape reconfiguration that generated a huge amount of productivity and made this valley a very vibrant place. But I was just commenting on some research that's been done in Shesk by Matt Peoples and his colleagues, who looked at some of the archaeological record and about the kind of what is the word of kind of disphasing? I think I'm thinking in Spanish, but the kind of that happens between the temporal dimensions of like investing in infrastructure and then what happens to population dynamics, the labor that's involved in maintaining that, and how the whole system gets locked into a particular types of practices. And all that needs to kind of adjust and change as the place itself becomes fixed in certain kind of modes of production. So it was just a kind of reflection on how the place as our involvement and modification of it, and it's can also become kind of locking us into particular practices. So their thesis is that was one of the problems that emerged in this valley, is that the labor was just too much for the canal maintenance, proportional to the population that was dependent on that productivity for its survival. So it's not my research, but I thought it was an interesting addition to this issue.
And we were sort of talking about your group, even though you weren't in our group. So Mauricio, we referenced your research, and we said, if we were planning for a future food system using participatory design, and we'll be reading one of Mauricio's articles in our groups about participatory design. Would we be designing that future food system for efficiency, or would we design it for, other values? And one of the things that we were talking about with the canal system is that the canal system used to be associated with these ceremonies and spirituality, and it wasn't just about efficiency, and when that gets lost, and the only thing that you're aiming for in your future food system is efficiency, what gets lost? So that might be a sort of arc over to your group now. I don't know if you guys talked about participatory design or future food systems, but maybe we'll just pass it back to your group now to see what you were.
Well, Mauricio, your last question, you can bring that up right now.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't talk much in the other group, but I came up with the last question because I felt that, for example, the big nets in one of the readings about the farmers in Seattle, or these Mexicans in Seattle, or the slow food, and I was thinking that maybe they are reporting some nostalgic or utopian situations. And sometimes we like to frame things in a way that are, this idea of the local, or coming back to I don't know how to pronounce that, but sovereignty of food is sometimes about trying to make real or materialize our desires about something that maybe is hard to do. So I think another thing, participatory design is not I mean, there are different strands in participatory design, but sometimes I think it's not really good when you try to bring people to validate your previous thinking about how things should be. So I think a better way to do this would be not just to try bring some people to validate or legitimize what we think it should be, like slow food or providing communities with sovereignty, but maybe trying to see, be more pragmatic and trying to see how we can actually change from an idea of trying to impose our views and rather trying to understand what people want and try to help them maybe acculturate better in the news context they are, for example. I don't know if I answered the question, but my question in the other group was to be more pragmatic or trying to materialize this nostalgia and utopian visions.
Well, we were just sort of speculating about your research, Mauricio, in terms of, you know, like what are the values that you would plan for in a future food system? Would it just be, you know, so participatory design would bring together the whole community to make the plan. It wouldn't impose a plan on a community from outside, or just say, you know, efficiency is our only goal. Everybody.
I would say that there are different flavors of participatory design. So I think the idea is that when you try to learn from the community and support them rather than legitimize what you think it should be.
One quick question is, I mean, it seems to me the juxtaposition between utopian and pragmatism seems a little bit of a false dichotomy to me. I mean, it seems like, first of all, pragmatism, pragmatic for what? I mean, in one sense, I think, and I guess this is where we get to, you know, Hallie's point about efficiency is that we, you know, if pragmatism is creating a lot of calories, then we've got it. We've got a very pragmatic, in that sense, short-term thinking, but system. But I know it's a larger question, so maybe that would take us too far afield. But one of the questions that we got off on as well, as we ended on Mauricio's point, but I think for the Mar article was, and this was one that is it Yuan? I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Brought up of thinking about from right in the beginning of the article of this question of, you know, what does it mean to go deep? And, you know, to tell you the truth, I thought I understood that until we started talking about it, and I think that's an interesting question. Do you want to say anything more about that, and also Melissa had some good points to say about that.
What does it mean to go deep in local food? Because yeah, I just want to know, after reading the Pina's article, and in the beginning she disagreed with her vegan friend because her vegan friend said something that yeah, I just want to know what's the deep, how can we go deeper in local food? Yeah. What are we missing on food movement and all those, you know, the food movement is good for promoting local organic food. I think it's a good thing. So I just want to know what's missing in here. What's missing in the current food movement? Yeah, my question is.
Good. Yeah, Melissa, do you want to jump in? Because I know you had some playing that out in a number of domains.
Sure. I think that, you know, local food has to be unpacked a little bit, knowing the layers of cultures that converge and you know, live and habitate areas going back 10,000 years. Is that deep food with the indigenous folks doing a variety of you know, food procurement activities, or the colonial, I think, you know, Dr. Adamson layered it pretty good, the storied landscape or the colonial landscape, and how they come together, and whose justice do you privilege? And then the reality of diaspora and diasporic communities who have been displaced and relocated and end up in a certain area. How do we support their food justice and local food systems, even though, you know, they're not from that area? And whose justice do we privilege? And that's where I look to Professor Sosi with her great work with Indigenous rights and land rights. But also in this whole area of food justice, it's about everybody's food justice, right? And that's a big question right there. And just one last point, it's also tied to land justice, right? You can't grow food or gather food without land and water. And so how, again, do we recognize the different rights and privileges of different communities working in that area? And I know there's some really great dialogues happening right now, intersectional conversations and intersectional movements with Black farmers and Native farmers, and really looking at the histories of oppression of both those communities and how they intersect or converge or conflict sometimes when you're looking at who has the rights to grow what foods in certain land bases.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about contesting some of the terms that, including local and deep and alternative and all those things. But one thing we didn't talk about, but I think is connected with both of these articles, is what is a community? Because by using that blanket term, what are you concealing as well as what are you revealing? And clearly one thing you could be concealing is gender within food communities and food cultures. And even the article that we read on intersectionality didn't really get us to that realization that perhaps that term satisfies some things, but neglects or conceals other things that go on that disadvantage certain members of a community, even as they advantage other members. And I was thinking about this when Mauricio, or Joni and Mauricio were talking about the values. What values would you choose? Because if you choose efficiency, Joan's pointing out, well, hey, we've got efficiency, but we don't have a very good system. If you choose food sovereignty, okay, but as we were just discussing, that may or may not work for all the communities or all the groups of people together. So the values themselves probably need clarification and deeper understanding about their unintended consequences as well as their intended consequences.
Good point. Yeah, that's something I know we talked about next time, since we've got food sovereignty as kind of the topic of, you know, and maybe, you know, if you're all going to come next time, is getting people to come with a, because that seems to me something that means very different things to very different people. I mean, I know from Rebecca's work as a lawyer and thinking about it as a legal concept and what it means that you actually have kind of legal, you know, jurisdiction over things and so on is very different from other ways in which it gets deployed, right? And so it may be multiple ways. And this goes maybe, you know, Constant raised some questions and that she sent to us, and I thought was something we could mention at this point is the idea of kind of siloing of knowledge. And one thing that's great about these kinds of groups is that we can, you know, we can hear from each other and try not to, you know, get too tunnel visioned into our own way of, you know, of thinking about all kinds of problems. I mean, I'm I mean, I trained as a philosopher, and yet I do a lot of interdisciplinary work, but I mean, philosophers are some of the worst at being siloed. So, but I do think, you know, so, you know, but you're right, you know, Sally, to bring up these, you know, all these notions, and, you know, we talked in our group about local, you know, what exactly, it's become kind of a buzzword. I mean, they use it in the grocery store now, you know, to meet, and it's supposed to carry some, you know, normative weight, like you're supposed to buy that stuff because it's local, you know, and so why should we care about that? What weight should that, you know, carry in that particular case? So, yes.
And just to reiterate, we really appreciated those of you that sent questions that sort of raised the question of terminology or keywords. You know, how do different disciplines use the word sustainability? How do different disciplines use the word justice? And this is the part I'm reiterating. So for next time, we do want everyone to think about the different ways in which we use the word sovereignty, or the different ways in which different disciplines use the word sovereignty, or nations use the word sovereignty. So as Joan just said, from jurisdictional to, you know, just thinking maybe, what does sovereignty mean to me? So we'll focus on that next time. But today, yeah, one of the issues, methodological issues, is how different disciplines use different terms, including ones that maybe we all sort of think that we agree on, like sustainability. But when you start working in interdisciplinary teams, what you find is it's not always the case that we're using these terms in the same way. Even the word Anthropocene, you'll find that geologists might use it differently than humanists. So in interdisciplinary teams, one of the things that you want to do right up front is sort of agree to agree. Well, when we use this term on our team, what is it that our team is going to agree that we mean when we use this term? It's an interesting problem for working together, so sort of walking the walk instead of just talking the talk.
Can I also share something really quick too, because I'm seeing Sarah, your comment in the chat around whose aim. The question was, can we be pragmatic in the aim of food justice? And you were asking whose aim? And I think that speaks to this conversation around language and the situatedness of language, rather than coming to the table and sort of saying, like, what is your definition of X and how is that used? You know, I may be speaking too much from my communication studies background, but words can also be leveraged and change over time, and be leveraged to do well-intentioned things that become harmful. And one of the threads that I saw in the chapter that we read, the Marius and Pena chapter, was the ways that even kind of the notion of food justice can become leveraged in ways that support whiteness and support property ownership and support, you know, forms of food procurement and sharing and growing that don't necessarily take into account systemic harms and systemic violence. And so what do we mean when we say we are proponents of or supporters of food justice and food sovereignty? In what is the power of the word, and even naming what we do, and what are the perhaps sort of consequences of using a term to describe something that is not rooted in the same ideas of justice.
It's a very good point.
Sarah, did you want to? Did you want to say something because you had it in the chat? Do you want to? No. Okay. It's not true. Did we get a chance to talk enough about the intersectionality? Or anything? I mean, we were to some extent running out of time. So should we turn to that a little bit? I mean, I think we were focused on the other article. So any thoughts on, I don't know what your group thought, did it have a central question about that article?
I don't think that we had necessarily a central point, but one of the things we talked about was how interesting it was that she, the first section, the section that was about African and African American perspectives on intersectionality and food studies. We were talking about the amazing number of disciplines that she pulled in. So she pulled in from literary studies, she pulled in from food studies, she pulled in from, I mean, it was just really interesting to see her practicing intersectionality in her essay on intersectionality. And maybe the group has additional things they want to add about that.
I really benefited from what Sally said, and I'm hoping that, Sally, you can reframe just a bit of that for the group as a whole, that idea of the twin sides of sort of uplifting and then oppression, but then how you look
well,
at and gender.
I pointed out that, I mean, there's a lot to say about intersectionality that we haven't discussed. That's definitely one of those terms that's become a buzzword and gotten away a little bit from
we're losing you, Sally. Oh. I think she's frozen.
She's frozen. Just for your information, if you ever freeze, just turn off your video and then come back. Which is maybe what she's doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you ever get frozen,
there
you are.
So I don't know if there's a way to kick people off or what, but anyway, I just got disconnected. I'm sorry. As much as I appreciate it, can I go on, or have you gone on to something else?
No, we didn't. Yeah, we're waiting for you.
Okay, sorry. As much as I appreciated the intersectional approach, the way they described it, and we talked a lot also about the disability angle that was very eye-opening for many of us. I commented that sometimes in an intersectional approach or approach that recognizes the diversity necessary to really examine issues like food or food justice, there's a tendency to go toward a kind of celebration and recognitions, because that's a phase where you just recognize, well, women have had a lot to do with food production and so on. And less of a tendency to understand what the flip side of that could be, and the ways in which women's responsibility for food production or food provision for families and so forth might have ways of oppressing them on a gendered grounds. And so that is something I've noticed in the research in the field of feminist food studies, of this push to recognize, which is certainly necessary, without the complementary analysis of saying, well, there are ways that it could oppress. So for example, in some cultures, women are required to feed their families, but they feed the men and boys first. And even if they've done all the production and the provision and so on, they may still be hungry at the end of the day. So those are things that I think need to be incorporated into an analysis.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's a similar point, maybe it's not a similar point, but just, we think about different, different food cultures in the United States, and if I knew more about the world, maybe I would know this too, but you think about some of the foods that have become associated with African American community. A lot of those are also ones that contribute to, obesity and heart disease and so on. And there's a reason that those foods grew up in those, communities, and similar things with fry bread and native communities. And so it's an interesting sort of pull between thinking about, cultural foods but then also, you know, not all those things are unqualifiedly good, and they're complicated, they're complex. So anyway, I think that's another aspect of you know, just going deep on these terms and what they mean and whether they're all good or not.
I was just going to say the deepness is what seems to be, you know, part of this is really understanding these long histories and opening them up for questioning. And, you know, in the climate change space, we've been, you know, there's some scholars in the UK who've been working with maize producers in Kenya and, you know, thinking about the future of maize, which is the basic staple in so many diets, but it's a colonial staple. So, you know, the viability of this crop into the future and the kind of place and effective, you know, what it means as part of your family's food, you know, central to the food system, but it's also historically situated. And so thinking about alternative crops and, you know, what they're valued and how they'd be valued and, you know, in these moments of deep transition where certain things may not be viable into the future. So it's interesting. It pulls up all these tensions and contradictions in those histories.
So we have about 1 minute left, and I want to end by just telling you a little bit about what it is that we're doing sort of over the long term. This group has been sponsored by Global Futures, the Institute for Humanities Research, the School of Future of Innovation in Society, and American Indian Studies. And so we want to thank our sponsors, but we also want to let you know that this is part of a larger Mellon grant, Mellon-sponsored grant. We are part of a consortium of 5 universities that converge first through Humanities for the Environment global network of observatories, which Sally and I and Joan and several other people on this call originally helped us establish at Arizona State University. So Arizona State University is a hub for the environmental humanities. It's recognized around the world, and we are now building a new Mellon grant with 5 other universities through the observatory system. This grant is going to bring us together most closely with the University of Pretoria in South Africa. So the things that you were just talking about, Holly, you know, what we want to do with this reading group is just start thinking about the kinds of projects that we might want to do with our 5 universities and specifically with the University of Pretoria. But long term, what we're trying to do is build a network of scholars that focus on food and food studies, critical food studies, food sovereignty, food justice. Building a global network, but a network that really sort of emphasizes graduate work and building an early career network. So we're looking to support early career scholars and postdoctoral scholars and graduate students in building this network that we hope will change things for the future. So yay, Sarah! Sarah and all of you who are, you know, helping build that early career network. That's exactly what this grant is meant to do. The Mellon Foundation is supporting that early career network. And so let's be thinking about the kinds of projects that we would like to work together on. Let's let this reading group be a place where we start thinking about that. And long term, let's think about how we're going to design the future of food through participatory design, using maybe some of Mauricio's ideas. But that's what we're going to be doing long term, and we welcome all of you. We have undergraduates in this group, we have graduates in this group, we have postdocs, we have assistant professors. We have everybody. We have all levels, and that's exactly what we're doing, is building a network that brings together all levels of scholarship, but mostly to change education, to revolutionize, transform education so that we think about all of these things together instead of separately, so interdisciplinarily instead of in silos. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about our group, our reading group, the grant, or
one thing is that we are going to, McKenna is going to, find McKenna, oh, there you are. She's going to be kind of transcribing our conversations, not with your names necessarily, so we don't want to, but just so that we all will have that as a document. I think it's these things I find when I'm there, I can't remember later what people said, and I want to, I don't have time to keep notes. But so I think it's really helpful to have that. So hopefully you'll find that helpful too. We'll make that available to everyone. And I think we can get the chat, because it seemed like there was lots of things going on in the chat too. We can capture that as well. So that'll all be available to you. And one of the things that I would like us all to be doing too is to be kind of building a bibliography together. So if there's, if there's articles that you, think maybe we can't read them all together, but that we could learn from each other's, what we've been reading, and we can make McKenna's email address available, and then she could start compiling those on a document, maybe a Google Doc for us, because I think it's always helpful to try to, start building that up, and then that's a resource for all of us. So.
Right, and we'll be sharing our bibliography with our South African colleagues, and they with us. So so we're building. Everything we do, we're going to be building it, in two places, here in Tempe and there in Pretoria. But we also have our other partners in Texas, Pennsylvania, Lebanon, and can you remember the other partner, Joan?
New Zealand.
And New Zealand?
No, I mean, not New Zealand, Australia. Australia.
Yeah, okay. So
one of those places down there.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
this first
great.
time. We really, really hope that you'll be back with us next time. We look forward to every one of our meetings. And please let us know if you have any questions or anything you want us to know about. But we'll be in contact with you for the next reading group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. Everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.